Hmm. Oh, I guess I am live. Bro, seriously? Like, starting up the stream game. By the way, guys, I apologize if I don't talk too much today. Just life, basically. So apologies for that. Also, okay, I'll say once I'm like, whoa. That's an actual cool car. Seems armor and stuff. Probably not gonna get it, but still. Okay, so like what I'm gonna do today is just like I'm really bored, not really feeling like playing, so actually I'm gonna get out of the public session then after this. So basically what I wanna do is like I was listening to this audiobook, right, or whatever. So I'm gonna just like get on a private session. I really don't want to deal with people today, so just get on a private session and then I'll just start driving and I'ma just play the audiobook. So like we'll just hear the audiobook and whatever while I do absolutely nothing. Yeah. Okay. Get out of here. That's $53 to mine in GTA. Like, it's like something, man. Actually, I think I could just drive and campaign. Like, why they? You just like back in bed? No? Okay. That's nice. Let's see. How do I do this again? Play GTA Online. It's friend session. Imagine having friends. I actually don't like that word anymore. So anyway, yeah, I found just like quiet or whatever. Like, just gotta listen to the audiobook and drive. Same time, I actually wish I could know where the freaking audiobook went. Oh, it's here. Um, to also send the audio from the audiobook to the stream. Something I never done before. I know there's like a capture data, whatever thing. But there it is. Application audio capture. Okay. So player, audible, personal, Microsoft. Use that one. Priority. I don't know what that is. Okay. That is the thing. If I just click play, it will work, right?
The plane is already starting its descent.
Oh shit. Okay, yeah, that's loud. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that was very loud. Okay, let's put it like 15. F14 should do.
The desert, brown and flat as a biscuit out.
That seems nice. Alright. Well, I guess that's what I'm gonna do. That works, I think. So, yeah. Also, guys, I'm sorry if I'm not, like, replying on Snap. I saw your message scroll, and I also see, you guys are replying to my TikToks and whatever. I'm sorry if I'm not replying, and I literally just basically have the phone on silent, and I'll start avoiding talking to anyone, honestly. Okay, to be fair, I mostly talked to Connor today. So checked up on Ninja because he has corona. So basically did that. But yeah, I'm kind of sort of avoiding my phone altogether. It's just alright, once again, my card, which I don't even know if I have.
I know. But fuck it, right? There's a lot of opportunity. Medical equipment, biotech. Chad's having a
I have my card?
We can scope it.
I'm on the clock. What you want? Some wheels?
Let me handle this.
Oh, too close to my car? Are you serious?
Okay,
Brother.
I got stuff to do.
I am so sorry. I did not mean to do that. I'm sorry. I legit didn't mean to do that. I was literally getting out of the freaking thing, bro. Okay.
It's been a while.
Just say I don't like that. It's so tough now, huh? Yeah. I literally said I kind of like the word friend and like what does this game do? Hey friend, like bro, shut up, honestly. What am I supposed to do with you? Do I just like put you inside or something? Cause like I want my car, I don't want you. Sure. At least it seems like I actually have room in there. Does this actually spawn me directly to the... Nope. It sent me somewhere else. Oh my, okay. Let me out. I don't... Oh my god. So bad at these. Oh, out. Out. You know, like, just give you the option, you know, like...
How are you? I knew people were supposed to be mellow out here. They are driving me fucking crazy. I can't even honk my horn at stop
It's
signs.
like,
They look at me like I've got leprosy or something.
I don't... I... why am I so bad at everything, honestly? Like, actually, why am I so bad at everything? I don't want anything, just let me freaking...
You need something, huh? One of your rides? Let me know. It's coming at you.
Oh, where's that freaking audible thing? Also, this thing, like the freaking. I'm not gonna stream for this long. Don't feel good, but this freaking audiobook, it's like 9 hours long. Like, bruh. I'm also probably gonna get copyright strike on freaking YouTube if I upload this today. I saved it there. Cause like, it is from Audible, so. Yeah, well, I don't know. So yeah, I'm just, basically I'm just gonna be, like, muted or just quiet. Probably just muted. Listening to the audiobook while I drive, cause I legit need to distract myself. Yeah.
Out the windows to the east. To the west, the mountains glowing Martian red in the slant of morning light. There's nothing psychic about it, but I know that's the way we have to go, and that Aaliyah Jackson is alive. You told Claire on the phone you thought it was happening again, Tillman says. On the job, with bureau stiffs like him, it's always surnames. Fernandez no different. But when it's just the three of us, in our motel room meetings and McDonald's lunches, he calls her Claire. Ostensibly because we're a team. Ostensibly because my skills come into greater focus when I'm made to feel comfortable. But the real reason is, he's as unrequitedly in love with her as I am. That's right, I say. How do you know? It's just a feeling. Okay, so we should be asking for a breakdown of friends, co-workers, boyfriends who might have had access to a wood shop, lumber, power saw out in the garage. Any way we can get a jump on it that way? Couldn't hurt, I say. But I doubt it'll make a difference even if something turns up. Because they won't talk. Because it'll be too late if they do. This quiets the three of us for a while. It's so close to us this time, Fernandez says eventually, reaching for her coffee. Colorado Springs. You think that's just a coincidence? It's a little weird for sure, but I don't know what it means, Claire, I say, with a glance Tillman's way. And I won't until I can sit down with a kid. Over the couple years I've been working with the FBI, 4 of our cases have had a nearly identical MO. A serial killer was the first suspicion. But the murders couldn't have been committed by the same perpetrator because 3 of the killers have already been tracked down and imprisoned. What we found on property searches, witness statements, circumstantial details, DNA, the physical evidence in each case was definitive. But the 2 men had no history with each other, no cross paths in their lives that might suggest collusion, all of which argued against a single mind behind the murders, a single set of hands. Copycats remains a possibility. For a certain kind of psychopath, such a distinctive style of killing might be seen as inspiring. But I know it isn't that. I know because the dead man has shown me where the bodies have been each of the 4 times. Eugene, Oregon. Woods. Duluth, Minnesota. Vacant lot. Yuba City, California. Landfill. Demopolis, Alabama. Golf course. He was there every time, guiding me. Every time too late. It's a remarkable thing, isn't it, Nathaniel? The police have their reasons for believing it's neither a single serial killer nor copycats who've taken 3 people. Their beliefs are based on profiles, timelines, the blood samples they keep in a freezer, along with the fact that there isn't a clear commonality between the victims. 2 adult women and 2 12-year-old girls. And I agree with their conclusions, but for reasons all my own. This fuss we make over life, the body, the skin, when it's what's inside that holds our value. I know it will happen again, not because we've charged the wrong people, but because there's more people to come who will do these things. And because I think it all has something to do with me. The dead man's voice has told me. My spirit guide who shows me where the boxes are buried. He's been with me since I was a boy. I call him the Bone Man. She's down there, Nathaniel. The ground rushes towards us. Both the visible Colorado landscape and the idea of everything beyond it. Snow-topped ranges, unpeopled flats, marshes, forests, riverbanks. I can never think of America now as anything but a vast collection of potential burial sites. And if I'm right, if this case is part of the pattern we saw in Eugene, Duluth, Yuba City, and Demopolis, then the one who's buried here has been buried alive. 3. The house is a mobile home so lopsided and distended with plywood additions, it looks like something that has dragged itself a great distance before deciding it could go no further. "Where's the corner store?" Fernandez says as we get out of the black Mercury that was waiting for us at the airport. We look both ways down a street of similarly improvised dwellings, all sparsely shaded by trees bony with drought. "Never mind the corner store," I say. "Where's the corner?" The uniformed cop who drove us here tells us there's a 7-Eleven down the slope where the street we're on meets a 4-lane artery that runs downtown in one direction and to the interstate the other way. "That's an easy route out of town. If she was picked up, she could be long gone by now," Tillman says, looking at me as if I've brought him to the wrong place. "She was picked up, but she's not far," I say. It's just a guess, but he and Fernandez both know I get this stuff right enough times to not ask how I'm so sure. "The boy's inside. We should get started," Fernandez says, starting up the short gravel drive. "It's showtime." My method is unique. Unlike the twig-wiggling dowsers or bracelet-fondling psychometrics or astral-traveling remote viewers who claim they can see a bloody sneaker in Tallahassee from their basement apartment in East Lansing, I need to be on the ground where the crime took place to do what I do. Specifically, I need to touch people. Usually, it's to hold a hand. Though, even a fingertip, or once, in the case of a burn victim, an earlobe will do. The contact is what lets me see. I don't read the person I touch, exactly. I access the memory and emotions of the missing person through the one I touch. It's something like trying to find a song on the radio by playing with the tuner until you find the right station. The person I read is the radio, and the one who's missing, the person I'm looking for, is the song. That's why it has to be someone close. Sometimes you can guess who this will be. Sometimes it can surprise you. It's usually a person who knew the missing well, a family member or partner or friend, but knowing them is less important than the intensity of the feelings they had for them, their love or desire or hate. This is where the surprises come in, because there are times when the subjects who give the best readings turn out to be the ones who made the people we're looking for disappear. You know those movie trailers that cut up images so fast at the end you can only catch flashes of things? It's kind of like that. A flip book, except one where the pages don't come together into a fluid motion, but a number of individual pictures that pass so fast it's hard to say what they are, what they mean. Almost never specific names or addresses or license plate numbers, though occasionally I get initials or a single word or a number. They don't always adhere to the rules of logic, or stick close to the case at hand, and therefore may only be useful part of the time, even if they're never outright wrong. That's what you give us, as Fernandez puts it. One damn thing after another. "Detective Dubnik," a bull-faced guy says, struggling to rise from the tiny kitchen table, his gut knocking the edge and sloshing coffee from his takeout cup as the three of us squeeze into the airless mobile home. "Agent Fernandez," Claire says, shaking the detective's hand. "This is Agent Tillman, and this," she gestures vaguely at me behind her, "is Nate Russo of the Bureau." He raises an eyebrow at me. "What, you management or something?" "Not exactly, I'm more..." Mr. Russo has a special expertise, Tillman interrupts. Interviewing children in post-traumatic situations. We thought he'd be of use in this case. The detective looks to me again, both eyebrows raised. It's what I do, I shrug. We already have a therapist here. She's talking to him now. Ask her to leave, now. A completely different voice from a second ago comes out of me so hard it knocks the big man back a foot. What? I don't want anyone talking to the boy. Nobody but me, so get your person out of there. The detective glances between Tillman and Fernandez. Please, Claire says. He backsteps through a doorway at the end of the hall. Murmured voices for a moment. I can only catch understand from her and feds from him. And then they both come out. The woman attempting a stare down with me on her way through the kitchen. But when I stare back, she coughs and takes a sudden interest in her shoes. Ready? Fernandez asks once she's gone. I don't want him here either, I say, and though I don't look his way, Dubnik knows I mean him. Would you mind waiting outside? Tillman says to him. The fuck is this guy? The detective splutters, but starts to go before remembering his coffee. He makes a move back for it when I stand between him and the table. Get out. He's the sort of man who is used to being the one to say such things to others, and he's got a face to prove it. A knife line of scar atop one cheek, his nose going one way before changing its mind. But today, he's the one to wordlessly turn and slip out the door, closing it with a careful click. You cool? Fernandez asks. I'm good. Want us in there with you? Just me. This has to be fast, and I've got to be clear. I don't need to be alone to do a reading. And in any case, it's often neither practical nor permissible. But ideally, the first reading is one-on-one to remove any potential distractions. And there's another reason too. I become someone else when I'm with the people I read. It's not an act, or anything like that. Not a patronizing voice that the grief counselor types use to lullaby people going through the worst moment of their lives. It's the real me. More real than the way I am every minute of my life except for these minutes. Entering a stranger's mind through a held hand. I've caught myself in mirrors when I walk into rooms, as I'm about to do now. And I see a different person. The man I might have turned out to be if my family hadn't moved to that upstate town and into the house where the bad things happened. There's something open in my face. A release of the tension that holds my grimacing mask in place. The one that makes me look permanently ready to throw someone through the wall. I'm Nate Russo. A man you might tell things to because he knows what's going on where nobody else does. And not Nate Russo, the seething giant who's grown his skin so thick he can't feel anything anymore. It helps with the readings. It opens people up. But it comes with a tremendous cost. To me. When I read people, like I'm about to read Jalen Jackson, the tear-stained boy who sits on the edge of a bed made of tussled Broncos bedsheets and looks at me as I pull open his door, I don't just visualize parts of the missing person's life. I do something for the person I'm reading. For Jalen. Because for the time I maintain contact with them, for as long as we touch, I take away all the pain and fear they're feeling and hold it inside myself. It's something nobody else can do, not even those closest to them. I bear their weight, and in doing so, it becomes mine. Not just for the time I read them, but afterwards too. Their agony joined with my own and transformed into a mass of anger that leaps and sees, a tiger in a cage seeking a way out. For right now, though, I'm the real me. Or the me I once was, almost a lifetime ago. No rage, no intimidation. Right now, I'm a scared kid, sitting down next to another scared kid, trying my best to make him a little less scared. My name is Nate, I say. Jalen. Hey, Jalen. First things first. You mind if I turn this on? I pull a digital dictaphone out of my jacket pocket and click the record button before he has a chance to answer. Are you a policeman? Nope. I'm not a social worker or counselor or anything like that either. Did you know my mom? No. But I'm gonna try to find her. The way I do it is a bit weird. I don't totally understand it myself, to be honest. It's just something I can do. The kid doesn't blink at this. Okay, he says. He's trying not to cry. His eyelashes, the round crest of his cheeks, trembling with the work of it. It's what his mother would tell him to do if she was here. I can almost hear her myself. Don't you dare show me any tears, little man. Not something imagined. An echo she left behind. I need you now. Understand me? All you have to do is relax. Put all this stuff that's happening right now out of your mind as much as you can. I won't ask you any questions. We won't talk. I just need you to think of your mom. You and her together. Playing a game, or maybe what the two of you did for your last birthday. Or just the sound of her voice. The magical singing shopping cart? What's that, a book? This thing we do. When I go to the supermarket with her, I sit in the cart with my legs sticking out, and she sings a song in my ear so only me and her can hear it. That sounds like a really good game. Yeah, he says, his eyes drifting to the window to the line of the mountains. It is. So think of that, Jalen, I say. Think of the magical singing shopping cart. Hear your mom's voice. See her face. He closes his eyes, and the tears collecting there race down to his jaw. His mother comes with them, the shared cheekbones, the wide mouth and lips pulled in so that his chin is a puckered circle, an old coin with the lettering rubbed off. One more thing before we start, I say. Can I hold your hand? I know it's a little odd, but it helps me see things. His eyes pop open. Will it help my mom come home? It might. He reaches out, grabs both my hands. It starts before he's expecting it. And even though I should be used to it by now, it starts before I expect it too. The boy's shoulders drop. His hands fall to the tops of his knees. A long exhalation of worry. And I breathe all of it in. It's like falling into a nightmare in midstream. Someone else's, now yours. Static and plotless. A freeze frame of loss. There was a person that mattered. The only one. And now she's gone. An absence that anchors my limbs as if my blood had thickened to cement. Along with a taste that no amount of swallowing can dispel. Chewed aluminum in the back of my throat. And then... it's Aaliyah. Speaking through her son, the words come out my mouth. I don't try to figure any of it out. Just speak what I see and feel and smell. What Aaliyah saw and felt and smelled without filtering any of it. Try to capture the most of what she's left behind. Overalls, onion breath, a tool belt, colored handles, red, blue, yellow, screwdriver, hammer, box cutter, pink lips, white skin, long nose, voice like a growl.
Sure.
Is there a name tag? He had one, but he ripped it off. Says it won't hurt. He lies. Feel the turns, feel the... antlers?
What do you
Dizzy.
need, boss? Some
Phantom.
wheels? I can bring 'em
CC
around.
God. Gods. Indians.
I'll get there
Cathedral.
as soon as I can.
Sunlight. No. No! That's it. That's all she gives me. But the kid won't let go of my hands. He's not troubled by the things I've just said aloud because I'm still shielding him from what it might mean. Yet, that's not why he holds on to me. It's because I've just done something remarkable. Performed a trick he believes isn't a trick, and he knows without a question in his mind what I'm now certain of too. I'm the only way. The only chance. Does any of that stuff I was saying just now make sense to you? I ask him. A man with a tool belt, but you haven't work done around the house? No? What about Antlers? That's her job. I thought she worked at a hotel. The Hilton Antlers. That's its name. Good. What about the other stuff? Do you know anyone called Cece? No? Phantom? That mean anything to you? Like a ghost? No? I don't know. That's fine. Thank you, Jalen. You did a great job. Will you bring my mom home now? We're gonna do our best, and she'll be okay? She's gonna be fine. Promise? A pause. Long, but not long enough. I'm gonna bring your mom home today, I say. I promise you. Only now does he let my hands go. Only now do I realize this is the only promise I've ever made in my life. 4 hours. They say it all depends on your weight, height, the amount of space you take up versus the amount of space that's left over. How calm you can keep yourself after you're put into the box. But who can really tell for sure? Who's ever been down there in the dark holding a stopwatch waiting for the moment when the last breath goes in, but doesn't come out? It's only an educated guess, but most of the guessers agree. 4 hours, max. Which means, for Jalen's mom, we've got maybe one left. Once I leave the boys' room, I can hardly breathe. It's the dead man who follows me, his smell permeating every corner of the mobile home's cramped space. The reek of animal carcass and turpentine and burnt flesh. My invisible friend, who isn't a friend. How did it go? Fernandez asked, but I barreled past her and Tillman and out the door. Once I'm outside, I lean on my knees, sucking air. The detective's shoes scuff into view. The hell happened in... Get a map, I say without raising my head. He tells one of the uniformed officers to grab a street map from his glove box and lay it out on the hood of our Mercury. A second later, Tillman and Fernandez join me in standing over it. We're here, Tillman says, jabbing his finger at a residential block at the south end of town. The rest of Colorado Springs is elongated, a narrow band with the outer range on one side and a few roads straying west into the plains on the other. Whoever took her was wearing a tool belt, I say, and he was white, maybe a repairman of some kind. Should we get a sketch artist over here? Fernandez asks. I didn't see enough of him for that. And anyway, there isn't time. What did you see? Not a lot. It was a bit off that way. I heard her voice all the way through, but only saw the outline of the guy at the beginning, and then blinding light at the end. After that, it went dark, and she went quiet. Did you get a sense that she's still alive? I think so, yeah. But I'm pretty sure he's already buried her. How do you know? I couldn't see anything. Only her voice. She was in the dark. Buried her? The dog-faced detective says. What are you talking about? It's too much to explain right now, Tillman says and pulls closer to Fernandez, forming a circle that excludes him. No, let him hear this, I say. And then to Dubnik. No questions, just try to give us the answers. He tries to spit in protest, but nothing comes out. Antlers is the hotel where she worked, I start. Is it situated on land where someone might have dug a hole without being noticed? It's downtown, all concrete and parking around it. What about Phantom? That a place? Maybe Phantom Canyon? It's a bar. Near the hotel? Right. That may be where she met him, Fernandez offers. Maybe. But it's not where she is now, I say. What about Cece? Who's that? No idea. Think. It's not a who, but it's what locals call the college. Like a nickname. Acronym. Colorado College, CC. Where's the campus? North end of town. Okay, so that's the route. He grabbed her here. I point on the map at the corner just down from where we are, where the 7-Eleven is, and took her north. Feel the turns. She was maybe blindfolded, but she was trying to figure out where she was. Maybe they went through the college grounds, kept going north or west, the hills. She was trying to say gods and Indians. What could that be? Dunno. There's no reservation up that way. How about a church? A religious site or something? No, nothing I can... Garden of the Gods! It's the cop who brought the map. He's been hanging around behind us, listening. What's that? Rocks, geological formations. It's like a special national park. The Indians around here call it a sacred place. The Garden of the Gods. That's it. Go. But Dubnik just stands there, blinking. The cop next to him gingerly folding the map like an ancient document. Move! Get as many uniforms as you can up there, Fernandez shouts, already jumping behind the wheel. This and the roar of the engine starts them scrambling for their cruiser. Bring shovels, I say before slamming the passenger door closed. 5. We hit the I-25 that runs a spine through the city. Behind us, and now joining from the ramps ahead of us, a line of wailing police cruisers push through the morning traffic. The highway will take us almost all the way to where we're going. Maybe 10 minutes at legal speed, 5 at what we're doing. The park is over 3,000 acres, Tillman says, working his smartphone in the back seat. You got anything that can narrow it down a bit? I only heard what she said, and it's an impression of red rocks, bright sun, sunlight, that's it. It's a tourist place. How'd nobody see him dragging a woman with him? It was early, I say. Maybe he went in by a different way from the public entrances, and maybe she wasn't dragged. What are you saying? She went voluntarily? Fernandez says, hitting the off-ramp too fast and fighting the wheel. Not exactly, but she wasn't blindfolded or bagged the whole time. Otherwise, she couldn't have seen some of the things she saw. It's like he wanted her to know what was happening. To scare her. Yeah, and for us to see it too. Through her. Like he knew you'd end up reading her? That's what it feels like. It's why this is happening so close, just down the road from Denver. Why we've got time. The game's changed. Why I smelled the Bone Man in the mobile home. I almost say, but don't. Why it was so strong I nearly threw up on my shoes. Up there, Tillman says, pointing to the park's entrance gate. The Garden of the Gods lies just to the west of the city's suburban boundary. The executive bungalows and private tennis courts yielding to the foothills and the strange rock formations of the park. The rocks themselves, though naturally formed, looked like alien sculptures, boulders carefully balanced on narrow plinths, fingers of red stone thrust out of the ground, cliffs abrupt and pimpled as indoor climbing walls. There's a pair of ambulances and a fire truck along with more cruisers waiting for us in the parking lot. A van with a crew unloading stuff I recognize as body detection equipment, the radars and sonars and heat sensors that won't find her soon enough. And you will? A voice in my head I wish was the dead man's, but is my own self-doubt. When has this ever gone well for you? Today. Today it will. We lurch to a stop, kneeing the doors open as officers fan out onto the grounds. They may get lucky if she's close, but even though there's dozens of them, they quickly appear small and slow against the vast hills of red earth, and beyond them, the mountains themselves. Any of this ring a bell? Fernandez asks as I survey the landmarks around me. From distant Pikes Peak above to the office towers and apartment buildings of the city arranged like Lego pieces below. All of it, and none of it. Let's hear it again. I pull out the dictaphone and play the recording of my reading with Jalen. When it's over, Fernandez shakes her head. How well did she know this place? I ask. Why? It could be important. Call the house, I tell Tillman. Get somebody to ask the boy if the two of them ever came up here. He doesn't like me being the one to order him around, but he does it. We're missing something, I say, once he's gone. We're meant to find her, Claire. We will, but we don't move. As much as both of us want to run out onto the slope of loose stones and sagebrush and look for a turned-over mound of sand, we can do more by finding the key first. Because on the burial killing cases, the dead man always gives us one, even if we only figure out what it is when it's all over. Picnics! Tillman calls to us as he hands a phone back to the officer he'd taken it from. Kid says they like coming up here for picnics. Did he say if they had a favorite spot? Different places every time. But that means they wouldn't have gone far, I say. Mother and son, carrying a bag of food and a blanket. They're not setting out on a hike. Cathedral, Fernandez says. What about it? You said it in your reading. We assumed it referred to this place as a whole, the religious significance to the native tribes, Indians. That was in there too. Yeah, that's why we're here. But maybe it's a specific site within the grounds. Tillman opens the brochure map of the park he'd already gotten his hands on. The three of us gathered around it so close our heads touch. There! Shit! Fernandez says, stabbing the map with her thumb. The cathedral spires. Where? She gets her bearings. There. A tall stand of clustered rocks spiked skyward, maybe a third of a mile away. A modernist church in ancient stone just behind a wall of larger hogback formations. We start running toward it without a word between us. As we go, a number of the police working the grid search pattern peel off and join us carrying some pickaxes and spades. A distance we cover in what feels like less than a minute, even with the stone slithering ground underfoot, the dodges around thorn bushes that grab and cut as we pass. Despite my size, I'm the first one there, the first one to see it. Shallow graves can take longer than you think to dig up. Even with 3 or 4 shovels plowing away at the same time, each driven by a strong man who wants to be part of a story that turns out right. Something good to replay at the dinner table or bar that night. We dig for the woman who lies beneath the surface, to save her life, but we also dig against our own fears, the earliest and worst and most primitive of them all. Aaliyah, we're almost there. Someone is bellowing down into the earth as they dig. It takes a moment to figure out it's me. Just hang on. 2 of the shovels hit wood at the same time. I clear away the top half of the box as Tillman does the same to the bottom. It's the same as the others. Pine, homemade but with evident care. A competent handyman's work, pale and freckled with knots against the orange clay. I'm on my knees, the only one, and there's room for only me to pry up the middle board with the hammer's claw and wrench it away. The woman in the box says something. For a moment, I think I see her lips part, an effort to form a word, a name. But it's only an illusion of hope, a trick of the blazing light on her face. When I touch my hand to her skin, it's already cold. The eyes glued open, unblinking. The burlap hoodie made her wear tossed upon her chest. The fingers dripped with red wax like candles, the blood losing its color even as I watch. She doesn't speak to me. But there's no question she looks at me. Not the vacant stare of a mannequin or doll. Her final moments of terror, something she wishes me to understand, to feel myself, something she blames me for. Get up, Nate, Fernandez says from what sounds like a great distance above me. I step up, refusing Tillman's hand. A young paramedic takes my place and immediately starts a round of CPR. It won't work. I've lived this before. Gone through the ritual of we did everything we could before. Seen the faces of policemen and federal agents and firemen and search volunteers freeze into mass of broken grief with every second that passes, without what they're silently praying to hear. A cry of alive, or breathing from the hole. A couple minutes later they call it. The sun has brightened even more in its ascent toward midday. The sky cloudless and implausibly blue. A mocking clarity to the men and women in various uniforms now turning to make their way back down through the red rocks as if the victims of a humiliating prank. I'll tell him, I say before Fernandez or Tillman can say anything themselves. Drive me back to the house. I'll tell the kid. That's not a good idea, Tillman says. Why is that? You're not with the agency. You're not a cop. What difference does that make? There's protocol here. And anyway, you've never wanted to be the bearer of bad news before. I promised him. Promised him what? Fernandez says. That we'd find her. That I would find his mom. See what I'm saying? That's something we would never do, Tillman says. Tell him, Claire. There's training for this kind of... He doesn't finish the thought. It's the fist I land against the side of his head. There's a satisfying sound that comes out of him at the impact. A wet whimper, followed by a nose-bleeding sneeze. It prompts me to land another blow, hoping for more of the same. But the second punch isn't as well lined up as the first, and Tillman brings up a jab of his own to my mouth. Not that I feel it. I'm too busy blindly going at him with both arms, toppling him to the ground. It takes 3 uniforms to pull me away. I'll give the son of a bitch credit, though. Even on his knees, he managed to shape a smile out of his instantly swollen lips. "Don't be too hard on yourself," he shouts as the cops drag me down the slope. "You did find her. Maybe you could tell the kid that. Make him read the fine print." They only let me go when we're back by the cars and ambulances and Fernandez tells them to. "Listen to me. This wasn't your fault," she says. "It's bad. It's the worst thing, I know, but it's not..." I'm driving back to where the kid lives and telling him his mother is dead. I'm telling him. Me. "Let me come with you. Alone." "Fine," she says and tosses me the keys. "But after that, don't you think..." "There's nothing after that. Because after that, I'm done. I'm finished with this. Nate, don't fucking call me ever again. Understand? Never again." She starts back to where Tillman has finally got to his feet. I notice just how many people are watching me now, wondering what crazy thing the big dirt-smeared guy is going to do next. And what he does is walk over to the Black Mercury, squeeze behind the wheel, and peel off like something was following him that he would do anything to shake. 6. It was worse than I expected, and I expected it to be bad. Jalen didn't say much, just listened to me stutter a couple of things I told myself I wouldn't. We did everything we could, before telling him the one thing I truly meant, over and over. The heartfelt, useless thing that we tell people who've lost everything. I'm sorry. In my case, it wasn't merely regret for his loss. It was an apology for failing him. For telling him I had magic powers, and then returning less than 2 hours later to tell him it was a lie. His mother is gone. I'm not a magician. Abracadabra, now you're as alone as I am. I think he even pitied me a little. His face watching me as I struggled with whether to put my hands in my pockets. There may have been tears on my part too, though it's been so long since I've felt those, I couldn't be sure. His calm seemed to be a gesture to ensure I was okay. I was a stranger telling him that his mom was dead, and he was looking out for me. But I'm probably wrong about that. It was probably only shock. The full weight of what he'd lost hadn't landed yet. Hadn't yet sucked all the air out of the makeshift home that, with the dead man's presence gone, retained a little of his mother's smell. The lilac shower gel and cigarettes and pot of coffee she'd put on when she woke up and never came back to pour her first mug of the day from. "Did you catch him?" is the only thing I can remember him saying. Not yet. But they will. Do they know who it is? I told them no. Another lie, in part. Because while I don't know what mechanic or roofer or electrician happened to be the one to pull Aaliyah Jackson off the street, I know who was behind it. The dead man who put the idea in a living man's head. Then the child services people knocked on the door. When I let them in and told Jalen to be strong, or some similarly empty note, and walked out into the assault of Colorado light, I was so relieved I had to fight the urge to lie down on the square of grass beside the driveway, close my eyes, and wait until night. Instead, I walked downtown and rented a car. Started north toward Denver. I may stop there. I may keep going. I'm only driving now, remembering the boy in the mobile home, punishing myself with it, though it won't be nearly enough. I deserve something worse. And when I come up with it, I'll sentence myself to that too. In the meantime, I might as well hear his voice. I tape every session on a dictaphone to record the things I say as I do my readings, along with something else, to capture sounds none can hear the first time around, but that sometimes come through if you turn the volume up and listen close. Whispering to me out of that background white noise, a voice faint and liquid, formed by a swollen tongue and passed through lips moistened by something thicker than spit. Overalls, onion breath, a tool belt, colored handles, red, blue, yellow, screwdriver, hammer, box cutter. There's pauses and gaps between these words as I say them, as long as a couple seconds or more. A space for another voice to speak. And it does. Something between screwdriver and hammer. I rewind and play it again at full volume so that I can make it out. Nathaniel. He always calls me that. The dead man's formal that way. Says it won't hurt. He lies. Won't stop. The sort of voice you could mistake for friendly. Folksy. Someone who might have seemed gentle if you saw him pass on the street or spoke to him on the phone or let him into your house to fix something that needed fixing. Indians. Cathedral. Time. He says what I sense he's about to say before I have a chance to turn the machine off. Sunlight. No. No. Time to come home. Part 2. The Johnstown Horror. 7. They let me stay in the crappy townhouse out by the airport for 3 months before the eviction notice popped through the mail slot. 60 days, of which 22 now remain. I should probably find somewhere else to live, but I don't know where to look. Denver has never meant anything to me aside from a place that has 24-hour liquor stores and a decent football team I can watch on TV. Easiest thing would be to stay, find an apartment downtown, become one of those old before his time ghosts who takes the bus from one end of town to another just to burn off the hours of daylight. Before Jalen Jackson, I would have known what to do once nightfall came. There was always a bar that needed me to complete its cast of characters, a bottle to fall asleep next to. But since I walked out of that collapsed trailer in Colorado Springs, I haven't had anything to drink. It hasn't been a spiritual awakening or anything like that. I haven't done it for myself. I just stopped getting drunk the same way I've stopped doing everything else. For a guy who takes up so much space, I'm barely even here. Even doing nothing, you'd be amazed how the time flies. I suppose it's like meditation, though without the focus or sense of peace. More like daily bouts of amnesia. You get up, and the next thing you know, you're sliding back under the sheets you've been meaning to wash for a week, with only the vaguest memory of what came between. A walk to King Soopers for a single can of SpaghettiOs. A closed-eyed shower that goes on as long as the hot water lasts. A drifting through the public library stacks until the security guard asks, "Can I help you?" with his flashlight drawn. Between jobs. The kindest way to put it. But even this suggests more structure than there is. It can't be said that I resigned my position with the FBI, as they would never admit I ever worked for them in the first place. And I'm certainly not looking for anything else. What am I qualified for anyway? Wrestler, maybe? I could wear a blindfold and call myself the Seer. Not that it would last. It's all choreographed, but I'd probably be canned after my first time in the ring for taking it too far. Throwing real instead of pulled punches. It comes from a lifetime of people wanting to have a go at me. The gloomy giant whose very presence could be taken as a challenge. The ones looking for trouble like to find it with me. And I can't help myself from fighting dirty. I spend most of the time wandering around thinking about the kid, Jalen, trying to imagine what he's going through now, and play the game where if I can feel what he's feeling, I might share the burden of it with him. Of course, it doesn't work that way. And unless I drive down there and ask him if I can hold his hands again, I can't come close to feeling what he's feeling, no matter how much loss I've absorbed from strangers over the years. From time to time, I find myself humming a tune I've never heard. It happened a few times before I figured out that it's Aaliyah Jackson doing the humming, not me. The melody of the magical singing shopping cart. So think of that, Jalen. Hear your mom's voice. See her face. I think about that a lot too. How I asked the kid to do the reading to save his mother when I was really asking him to do it for me. To win this scavenger hunt I have going with a dead man only I can see. Isn't that why I took Fernandez's calls and flew around the country digging up bodies? Was I really trying to save a life or save myself? Truth is, I considered that was how it might work. If I found one of the missing still breathing, if I won, he'd leave me alone. Will it help my mom come home? No. That's what I should have told him. Because nothing could have done that. The dead man won't let it happen. He wanted me to come close with Aaliyah Jackson, closer than I've ever come, but still lose. Because he's a monster. Because he likes what he does. Because he's not done yet. There was a 3-day stretch of rain where I didn't go outside on account of every time I tried, I'd see the faces of the dead looking up at me from the puddles. I recognized them too, the ones I'd found. All of them wide-eyed, staring straight into me the same way they were the moment I pulled the lid off their boxes. Over that time, the landline phone rang a couple times. The sound of it so shattering and alien, I nearly threw it to the floor to make it stop. Each time I guessed it was someone from the bureau, an administrator asking when I was planning on vacating the premises and where my last check might be mailed to. When I finally listened to the voicemail, I'm surprised to hear it's not them, but my brother. Hey there, Nate. It's Tim. Both messages start this way. 2 sentences followed by a pause so long, I assume that's it. That's how they'll both end. But then he tells me he has some news. So, call me back, okay? It's not the sort of thing I want to leave on a message machine, he says. Know what I mean? No. I don't know what he means. But I'm pretty sure I'd rather not find out. Whatever constitutes news in my brother's life is almost certainly cause for concern, even if he thinks it's the best thing to have ever happened to him. Tim Russo is what passes for charming in dead-end towns. The kind of guy who comes across, at first, as something better than whatever he's doing at the time. A man pivoting toward better things. What you come to learn is that his real talent lies in bad decisions. My brother, the disappointment artist. 3 marriages, a dozen addresses, countless jobs and low-level business ventures have all come and gone for him. And yet he never seems to grasp that luck is not his thing. What's puzzling to me is how, after this 2 decades-long losing streak, he continues to find a way to do anything, be with anyone. Then again, maybe he's not the lovable dupe I choose to see him as. Certainly his ex-wives, given the way they hound him for unpaid settlements, are unlikely to think of him that way. And for all I know, he may have swindled as many others as he's been swindled himself.
Hello, Pegasus Lifestyle
I think back to the
Management.
last
How can
time I
help
saw Tim. To that motel lounge on the outskirts
you?
of
Thank you,
Spokane.
sir. Your specialist
The envelope
vehicle
of
is now
cash I
ready for
handed
you
him to
at
get
our
him out of a
nearest pickup
spot.
station.
The doubles of Shivas that we both ordered afterwards, as if in celebration of a complicated merger. The next morning, he failed to show up for breakfast. The desk clerk told me he hadn't stayed the night at all. My fingers count off the months since then. Just shy of 4 years. And I don't call him back now either. I'm lonely, But I'm not alone. He's here with me, waiting for us to play the game again. Whispering what I tell myself are nothing but empty threats. They must be, for what can a dead man do to the living? As the days pass, I believe it less and less. I didn't believe it to start with. Something's coming, Nathaniel. He's standing there a few feet beyond the end of the bed. I awaken from my nightly sleepwalk to the bathroom, and he's in the dark corner of the room, coming into focus as I squint at him, as though it's my effort to see him that allows him to exist. He doesn't come any closer than that, but he'd like to. He'd like to put his knees against the bed frame, make it squeak. He'd like to bend low enough for me to get a good smell of him, taste his words as well as hear them. Just like the old days. Something special. I rush for the light switch by the door, flick it on. He disappears, but not immediately. For a quarter second, he stands there more vividly than the dirty shirts and fast food wrappers around his feet. A standing corpse who wills himself to stay on this side. Stay with me. In this sliver of time, he moves his lips, and I try to hear whatever he wants to say, just as I've always listened, always waited. Once he's gone, I wonder if he was only reshaping his mouth into a smile. 8. I know better now, but when my parents moved from Albany to the potholed avenues and noble red bricks of Johnstown, New York, it was sold to me as a move up in the world, a new beginning for my brother and I, in a piece of America that America barely has any pieces of anymore. That was my father's phrase, repeated enough times that even though I was only 7 at the time, I clearly remember. Not only the words, but his tone. The PBS voiceover's baritone capped with a nostalgic sigh. He'd probably heard someone say it on TV in the first place. He was a borrower of ideas. A passionate, convincing, mostly vacant man. My father was easy to like, and my mother was his ideal audience. A woman grateful to have landed someone so solid-seeming. Vic Russo spoke with the openness and digestible wisdom of a bearded man, which he in fact was. One of those professorial beards popular at the time, tidily clipped and frequently stroked. It was a signal of warmth, but also strength. The capacity to chop wood or ride a horse, neither of which he ever did. Yet it was with a sense of returning to the country that my father came home one night and announced he'd bought a place a further hour upstate. A property he vacillated between calling a mansion, an estate, and a manor. He wasn't exaggerating all that much. Our new home sat on a double lot at the corner of Henry and Montgomery, a couple blocks south of Main Street. Its facade looked like how old children's picture books would illustrate country schoolhouses. I shared my father's enthusiasm for the place, his astonishment that we'd managed to upgrade from our suburban bungalow to this 3-storied heritage home for some town founder or other, its copper fountain side yard, its blue gabled roof. It took less than an hour to move in. We brought only our suitcases and a couple of boxes of favorite books and toys, our parents promising that the rest of our belongings would arrive in a moving truck in a day or two, but they never did. Instead, my father made a big deal of going antiquing on the weekends, which amounted to yard sale haggling over splintered tables and chairs, along with 3 beds he saw advertised in the Leader Herald, and that he talked the seller down from 50 to 20, delivery included. We were on the run. I think I had some vague sense of this even at the time. Our moving to Johnstown was about escape, not arrival. The way our parents told us not to answer if the doorbell rang. The sunglasses and ball caps my father took to wearing, the whispered phone calls he'd make at night to someone he kept demanding to keep your damn mouth shut. I was a dreamy klutz of a kid, but I wasn't stupid. The thing is, I liked Johnstown. Crumbling and slow, but also distinguished. I imagined it as a place where most of the important things had already happened, the landmarks erected and battles fought, and we were its living caretakers. Even before I started seeing them, I knew my life was to be bound up with the dead some way. I liked the house even more than I liked Johnstown. There was an immediate sense of belonging to its mahogany staircase and creaking floors, so intense it struck me as odd even at the time. An intoxication, a chemical giddiness, exploring its wallpapered halls and slant-ceilinged attic with the buoyancy and promise of adventure. Something entered my blood those first times I walked through the maple double doors of 34 South Henry Street, a thrilling high that soon fell away with the abruptness of a curtain pulled from its hooks. I went to bed one night looking forward to what the house would show me the next day, and woke up in the morning afraid of what it might. The shift occurred only a few days after we moved in. It was autumn. Warm when we set up the beds in our rooms, cold and windblown by the time Tim and I attended our first day at our new school. The oil furnace was no match for the October air that found its way through the windows, the glass smudged and thin as newsprint, so that we went around wearing toques and kept our boots on at the card table we ate our dinners at. And when we did eat at that table during those first weeks, I looked around at my parents and brother and thought I could see the same withheld dread I felt building within myself. But their worries were not the same as mine. My father wondered if he would be sued by the company he worked for in Albany, one he used as a launch pad for a bogus investment fund under his own name. My mother wanted her husband to be what he used to be, to regain the self-certainty he once possessed and that had so quickly abandoned him. My brother saw his own looming teenagerhood about to be wasted in a town where there appeared to be only wholesome church-going girls and curfews. As for me, I was worried about the house. The thing I could feel moving along its floors and through its walls. Beyond its laughable insulation and bulbs that couldn't push light into the corners even with all of them on, it was a home for a presence other than ourselves. I knew it wasn't a ghost, dead, but not a spirit. It had been waiting for us, for anyone, to come inside. And now, using us like jumper cables on a car battery, it was surging to life. It was already more alive than any of us. Not that I told my family this. I tried to keep it a secret, for their sake, to protect them from what they seemed not to be aware of. But keeping him to myself became harder once I stopped just sensing him and started seeing him and hearing him too. It started with the scratching. I would hear it at night in bed. Not awakened, but pulled back as I fell into sleep. That middle ground where dreams are so vivid there's a question whether or not they're dreams at all. Nails against wood. Long drags at first. Fingertips exploring the surface to find a way through. Then shorter, faster. A panicked scrabbling. It was impossible to determine where it was coming from in the dark. Sometimes, I'd guess it was against the inside of the closet door, and other times from the air of the room itself. The worst was when I was sure it was coming from under the bed. There was never a voice. No breathing or gasps of terror or shuffling of body parts. But I could imagine all that. Could feel the enclosed space of the box around me. A snap. Something like a rubber band pulled to breaking. A fingernail ripped from the tissue that held it. And another. Along now with the wet slide of blood. It would only stop after I screamed, "No!" Nobody ever came to my room. Maybe nobody ever heard. The room absorbing my voice as if the walls were made of cotton. One time I made myself listen to it all the way to the end. Squeezed my eyes closed. Bit my lips shut. The scratches eventually slowed. Weakened into knocks, knuckle bumps. A last spasm, as though with the stiffening of limbs. Then nothing. It took a lot less than 4 hours. For a period of days, I heard the scratching every night, and then less frequently. The sound of it lowered in the way of an echo at the tail end of its repetition. I hoped that would be it. A period of isolated weirdness, like a pain that goes away on its own just when you think it's time to call the doctor. For Christmas, Dad acquired a sofa from an estate auction and a TV from a pawn shop in Utica. "Instant living room," he announced when my brother and I came in from throwing ice balls at each other to find Night Court broadcasting studio audience laughter through the house. It sounded wrong. It sounded like something we'd be punished for later, like farting in church. Given what had been going on in my room, I stayed on that sofa and watched that TV as late as I could. I don't know if it was the bill collectors hounding them or the energy-sapping spell the house had cast, but my parents were sufficiently distracted to forget to tell me to go to bed. I don't remember any distinction between weekends and school nights. Our evening routine was the same. My mother and father would separately drift upstairs, followed eventually by Tim, who never said goodnight. Once alone, I turned the sound down, loud enough for the voices to keep me company, but quiet enough not to attract the attention of the house's other unsleeping presence. The sofa had floral covering and fabric flaps that reached the floor. I liked to sit on the cushion on the far left side so I could reach the lamp in case it went out, as it often threatened to, the bulb flickering as if a moth was repeatedly attempting a landing. Behind me, the main floor hallway oozed with liquid darkness that spilled into the room and splashed against the walls. One night, as Johnny Carson held a card to his Swami turban, I felt something brush against my ankle. I looked down, saw nothing. A mouse? I'd once had one chew on my shoelaces in a movie theater in Albany, and flung it off with a kick, sending it squeaking down the aisle. So I knew that ankle nibbling was the sort of thing they'd do. It happened again less than a minute later. This time I was faster. I lurched forward in time to see the flap of fabric swing closed. Why did I stay? Why leave my legs over the side, my feet, socks only, my boots wet from slush, on the floor instead of tucked up next to me? The same reason the deer stops in the middle of the road at the sight of headlights coming around the corner. Turn back, carry on, shout upstairs, run to the hallway. A seizure of indecision. The flap rose again. I could hear it. When I leaned forward, I could see it too. It remained that way for a moment, trembling, and then a hand slid out. White. I thought it was skin at first, but then saw it was bones. The exposed, half-dried flesh. Fingers dragging it forward. The tendons tightening and loosening like piano strings. It grabbed me by the ankle. I tried kicking it off like the mouse in the movie theater, but it was stronger than that. A narrowing vice I would snap my shin bone in half. The pain so sudden there wasn't time to voice it beyond a hiccuped intake of breath. It wasn't just holding me. It was trying to pull my leg under the sofa. I dropped to the floor, clawed at the wood. The same sound I'd heard in my bedroom on previous nights, the fingernails mine this time, trying to find an edge to gain purchase in the polished boards. The trick was to not look back at the hand. If I saw what it belonged to, I was certain I'd freeze. So I scratched and kicked like hell. None of it worked. The hand inching backwards, winning each tug-of-war pull. In seconds, my leg had disappeared up to the knee. Then my free foot slapped flat against the frame, started pushing. The back of the sofa boomed against the wall, but this only made my leverage more sure. I stopped using my hands and put all my remaining strength into the free leg for a final kick. Timed it when the hand was readying for another heave of its own. Its grip paused. My ankle slipped free. I rolled away over the floor and kept rolling until I hit the TV, my eyes 3 inches from the screen. A sweat-glistened Ed McMahon losing it at one of Johnny's jokes. When I let myself look back, the hand was gone. I tried to question if it was there at all, except I knew it had been, and I could see what it had done. On the skin of my ankle, exposed from the sock nearly pulled all the way off, was a throbbing red band. Finger marks. Rising welts of bruise from the press of its bones in my skin. I should have gone to bed, pushed my dresser against the door, sat awake until morning. Instead, I got a hockey stick from the hall closet, got on my knees in the middle of the living room, using the blade of the stick to lift the flap of the sofa's trim. It was dark under there, but there was no hand. Nobody lying there that it might have belonged to. Only a couple of gray dust bunnies rolling away in the new current of air. Not that I could see all the way to the wall. Not that I got any closer to make sure. The next day, I picked up a chair in the trash at the end of a driveway a few blocks over. 3 of the spokes of its back were broken, but I fixed them as best I could with crazy glue and duct tape. From then on, when I watched TV, I never sat anywhere but on it, set 10 feet away from the sofa. I don't remember anyone asking why I did it. A kind of illness had befallen us all by then, and one of the symptoms was exhaustion that drained all curiosity away. After that one time, the hand never found my leg, but that didn't mean I never saw it again. Throughout that whole winter, when the rest of my family sat on the sofa, their faces drooped in televisual numbness, I would see the flap rise, lifted by fingers of bone. Once, as I watched, something else came into view. The lower half of a skull looking back at me. Nathaniel. You okay there? My father asked me, stifling a yawn. You look a little green. Just tired, I said. Though my stomach felt fine when I say it. Once I got upstairs, I barely made it to the toilet before throwing up. You'd think I wouldn't have been sleeping all that well, but I don't recall any dreams or nightmares disrupting my nights. I resisted going to bed, but once under the heavy blankets, a chair pushed against the closet door and the bedside lamp left on, I drifted off without a fight. For a time after New Year's, the upstate winter snow piled up on the window's ledge like a wave crashing against the glass. I stayed asleep until morning. And then, around Valentine's, he started coming into my room. I would hear someone in the hallway, the creak of steps, too heavy to be my brother going to the bathroom. My parents had an ensuite, so they never ventured outside their room, even when Tim cried out from a bad dream asking for Mom. Maybe they didn't hear. Or maybe they did, and stayed where they were in their own private fears. It had to be him. So I too stayed where I was, eyes closed tight, wishing to be transported across the Black River to the pale dawn on the other side. He paused at my door. It was the first time I noticed the smell, similar to the scent of Johnstown itself at certain times. It was a town built on the leather trade more than a century and a half ago. Tanners and stitchers, makers of gloves. Most of the skin mills were gone by then, but the couple that remained issued the distinct odor of sharp chemicals along with something rotten. The sweetness of the hides that held the remaining traces of animal flesh in them. This was his cologne. Though as he took his first steps into my room, it was much stronger than what occasionally drifted over town. It wasn't on him. It came from him. His breath a foul mixture of the tannery and the grave. For a stretch, he did nothing more than stand at the end of the bed. I imagined him looking down at me, contemplating the too still shape of my curled form under the frayed quilt. Eventually, he would leave. Until the night he didn't. The night he reached down and squeezed my toes. A hard pull followed by a twist, meant to cause a flash of pain, draw a gasp from my throat to prove that I was awake. I couldn't stop myself from making that sound. Couldn't prevent the reflex of yanking my feet away from where he stood, leaving me a huddled mound against the headboard. But I kept my eyes closed. It had the advantage of not seeing him. It had the disadvantage of not knowing if he was still there. The first night he squeezed my foot, he left. The next night, he came closer. The smell of him reaching through the sheet held over my nose. His breath blown cold over my eyelids, finding a way through. Nathaniel. His voice more intimate than if it was whispered into my ear. I will never leave you. He meant for the rest of my life. But he also meant now. He wouldn't leave until I opened my eyes. To think of it all these years later, it might seem that I was brave, but I know it was the opposite of that. I looked so that he might take me, or hurt me, or do what he'd come to do and it could all end. I looked because it was less terrifying than refusing to. Exposed cheekbones, round and spotted as goose eggs. His face's only flesh, the pair of leathery jug ears and lips, puffy with rot. The purple snake of a tongue. His face held 3 inches over mine. I am your gift. 9. I still don't know what happened after that. He did the same thing enough times that you'd think I'd recall how I went from him exhaling his promises to never leave me, to the morning's light dusting into the room to show that he was gone. Whatever it was, I was grateful to be free of the moment. Though there was always the next night, and the next. I worked to believe it was over, that my life would return to the merely awkward and fog-bound thing it was before. And if I believed it, then it was true. Except it wasn't. He came to pull my toes or stand over me almost every night through that spring. I kept it to myself as long as I could. I tried to see him as a test, something that might be endured. A way of seeing if I was a man or still a child. And if I'm to be honest, there was a part of me that wondered what the nature of the gift he promised would turn out to be. I told Tim about it, gave the dead man a name. I called him the Bone Man. When I was finished, my brother kept looking at me as if I was still talking and he was concentrating on reading my lips. Have you noticed anything weird since we moved here? I asked him finally. Have you seen him too? No, I haven't. My turn. Okay. Are you fucking high? Normally, my brother would laugh after saying something like that. One of his porcine snorts. But he didn't laugh or snort, which told me he was lying. He'd seen or felt something too. Perhaps not the Bone Man himself, but an unsettling trace of him. And he was not about to lend it substance by admitting to it, even if his little brother had. To him, I had just offered to carry this on my own, to be the lone beacon for it when it came back again. And all he had to do was treat me like I was nuts, and he might deflect the house's attention from him to me. Seriously, I pressed. You haven't noticed anything? It's an old house, he said. What should I do? Do? Yeah. He seemed to actually think about it for a second. I don't know, little brother, he said. But whatever that thing is you think you got in your room, don't bring it into mine. There was a window at the end of the second-floor hallway, veiled with yellow chiffon curtains that came with the place. I would see the dead man there around the same time in the afternoons, after I'd returned from school and would bound up the stairs to retrieve a clutch of comic books and hustle back down to the main floor. He always took me by surprise. I should have known he'd be there. He almost always was in the pre-dusk hour before the streetlights waged a hopeless battle against the oncoming March night. But in my rush to go back down to where my mother or brother were staying warm in the kitchen, I'd forget about him. Only to be reminded when I was stopped by his silhouette, tall and swaying like a hanged man. It appeared that he was floating an inch off the floor. Something in the lanky ease of his motion, the curving of his spine, liquid and snake-like, suggested this. But his movements came with a sound that proved he was standing on wood. A solid weight, real as the chipped walls and water-stained ceiling that framed him. His boots, the leather soles scuffing the boards as he leaned to one side, then the other. He wore clothes as rotted as the rest of him. Brown or khaki or some lighter shade. A uniform, a mailman's perhaps, a milkman's, or delivery man's or cop's. He was looking through the curtains at the street, aware that I was there behind him, but his attention on something else. Home. He was murmuring to himself as he watched. Home to Mommy. One afternoon, a week or so before Christmas, I saw him there, and instead of heading downstairs, I crept up to the third-floor attic. At the front of the house, directly above where he stood, was a pair of smaller windows side by side. To see more than a narrow band of the outside, I had to press my nose to the cold glass. I saw what he'd been waiting to see. Heard his voice seep up through the vent next to where I was kneeling. There you are. A girl. 4 or 5 years older than me. I recognized her. Had seen her enter and exit a shabbier house a couple blocks down from ours. She wore a crimson hoodie inside her parka, her head covered with it so that she proceeded along the sidewalk like a monk. She was pretty in a way you could tell she didn't care about being thought of as such. I leaned over to the side, looked down through the vent, a square hole through the floor covered with a wrought iron gate. The dead man wasn't there. He should have been, had been, because from my angle I could see the yellow curtain window where he'd stood, where he'd watched the girl go by. I shifted again, looked straight down. His face, his poached egg eyes meeting mine. Did you see Nathaniel? He ground his teeth together. Yes. Oh, yes. You did. That night I told my parents. I found them sitting at the dining room table, a spray of bills and legal notices all around them. When I announced I wanted to talk to them about something serious, they both looked up at me as if I was a stranger who'd walked in, and they were both wondering whether I might be shooed away with a rolled-up newspaper. Serious? My mother repeated, weighing the word. It's pretty strange. Strange and serious, my father said with one of his smiles that wasn't a smile in any real sense. There was no way to cushion it. No introduction that might increase the odds of it sounding sane, so I just blurted it out. The good feelings about the house that turned bad, the scratching, the dead thing that lived under the sofa, the same thing that looked out the window at a girl who went by like a starving man eyeing the hanging meats in a butcher's window. I finished by telling them that we had to move before it could get worse. Worse? My mother repeated. Before something happens, I said. My father's fingers were at his beard, pinching and twisting. That's quite a whopper, kiddo, he said. Haven't you noticed how things are different here? It's a new town. Always takes a little time to... Not the town. Us. As soon as we moved in here, we all got so sad. I hadn't thought of it that way until I said it. And as soon as I had, it filled me with a new sadness. Your mother and I have been distracted, it's true, my father said. We've had some issues, business-related. It's all of us. It's not issues, it's in the house. There were tears then, and I hated myself for them. Give your mother a hug, my father said. She opened her arms and I stepped into them. My need for comfort overwhelming my need to be believed. It was over at that point. My breathing in my mother's sweater that smelled of the glamour of perfume and smoke was a concession I could never take back. There was little chance of convincing them now. Perhaps I would have protested, made another attempt, if this embrace hadn't been the only one I could recall receiving from either of my parents for weeks. Probably as long as we'd lived with the Bone Man. I wiped my eyes against my mother's neck and knew that whatever he was, he represented the opposite of family. If he was watching, he would see only the weakness and desperation in the way I clung to my mother. That, and how easily we might be parted. 2 weeks later, the girl was gone. 10. The snow melted, returned, melted again. An upstate spring of mud and block storm drains, and sidewalks treacherous with dog poo landmines. Maybe a month had passed since I saw the dead man looking out the second-floor window at the girl in the red hoodie walking past. The same girl who went missing on Wednesday, March 14, 1984, on her way home from the Miss Johnstown Diner on Main Street after getting ice cream with her friends. Her name was Pauline. I'd seen her on the street on occasion, but she was bundled up against the winter, and I was shy about even looking at girls, so I never got to really study her. Not like after what happened, with her smiling photo taking up half of the Leader Herald's front page. Missing. Search. No leads. I knew, as everyone else did, that this was the official language for her already being gone. Because Pauline Alt's disappearance was undeniably real, and because I'd already told my parents how the dead man had liked to watch her, it felt like a connection to me. If not proof, then at least a coincidence to pry open minds that would otherwise remain closed. She's out there, Nathaniel. Leaning over my bed at night, he said it teasingly, as if it was a game with rules I already understood. Can't you hear her? And I could hear her. The scratching that had started all over again in the night, making me sit up, fighting against pissing the bed for fear of what I might bump into if I got up to go to the bathroom. It stopped after a harried knocking so loud I was sure everyone in the house would hear it. But when it was done, nothing moved. I even put my hand against my chest to feel for my heart. After school that day, I waited until my father was alone in his office, a den at the back of the main floor stacked with cardboard boxes and a couple of fold-out lawn chairs, and came in to tell him that I thought Pauline Alt had something to do with the house. He asked me to sit down, gesturing at the unoccupied lawn chair next to him as if it were made of leather and this was an executive interview in which he had the final say. "Please," he said. "Start again. Remember a while back I told you and Mom about the stuff going on at the..." "Did you know anything about this, Nate?" He interrupted, his face suddenly close to mine. "Did you see anything? Not just ghost stuff, anything real?" His expression revealed the horror of an unconsidered possibility. It came upon his so abruptly that it was like a physical blow from behind that knocked him from a seated position to a crouch, his hands on my shoulders for balance. He was thinking I might have been sworn to secrecy, or witnessed an awful act, or been involved somehow. He was thinking I might have done it myself. "No," I said. "What about your brother?" "No." Okay, good," he said, falling back into his chair with a sigh. That's when his relief turned to something else. A twinkly-eyed look he got when he shared a new business scheme with my mother across the table. "So now, tell me again. What part?" "The whole thing. The creepy things you saw, the girl outside the window. Tell me the whole story again." When I started, he held up a hand, pausing me as he got up to pull a legal pad and pen from the top of a duct-tape banker's box. "Okay. Go." He wrote all of it down. In my need to be believed, I thought it was because he'd changed his mind or was on my side now. It never occurred to me that he saw a value in what I said. I never thought, as he asked me for more details and I offered them to him as best I could, that he saw me as a way out of his troubles, more than I saw him as a way out of mine. That was the last time anyone asked me about the Bone Man. It became my parents' story after that. One they embellished over bottles of the cheap red wine they were plowing through a lot of at the time, throwing in mounting episodes of shock. All of our beds shaking violently in the night, a howling voice coming from the cellar, my father having to go to the hospital after a demonic figure slammed the cellar door in his hand, but ending in the same place, with Pauline Alt's disappearance. My father could see the structure built into the narrative, along with the advantages of an ongoing mystery. He could see the opportunities. Only 7 years earlier, the Amityville Horror had come out, with a cover that categorized the contents as a true story. It was a bestseller for months, and spawned a movie soon after. The family who lived through the experiences, the Lutzes, were on the talk show circuit for a while, and I dimly remember their hushed selves on the Merv Griffin show, the feather-haired mom and bearded dad, never the kids. It was thought that, while the story itself was a compelling haunted house tale, what set it apart was two unique angles. The first was the claim that its events were linked to an actual crime. In the Amityville case, a family's mass murder that took place in the house before the Lutzes moved in. The second was the then original marketing campaign of verified truth. There were witnesses, paranormal experts, the involvement of a priest and police. There was an educated middle-class American family at the heart of it too. The sort of people you'd be inclined to believe. A family like ours. Those people, Dad said more than once that spring as the search for Pauline Alt intensified on Johnstown streets and in the fields and trees around it. They must have made millions. In the early April, Dad called one of the TV stations in Albany. They had a reporter whose name is stuck in my head, Rick Needham, who tended to do the lighter stories, the charity events and dog and cat best friends pieces and old ladies making it to their 100th birthdays. That's who showed up at the house with two other men, one heaving a camera on his shoulder and the other with a furry microphone at the end of a pole. Mom and Dad gave Tim $5 and told him to take me downtown to buy candy. We lingered in the front hallway long enough to hear the two of them start telling Rick their trumped-up version of the Bone Man story. "Wait," Rick said. "Do you mind if we get this on camera?" My mother looked at my father as if this request came as a surprise. He pretended to consider it, gave her a why not shrug. Then Rick glanced over at us. "Should the children be here for this?" he said with an exaggerated frown. "I mean, if this all gets a bit nasty." Mom told us to clear out as she assessed her profile in the hall mirror and applied fresh lines of lipstick. I can't be sure about this, but before Tim closed the door, I think I saw Dad give me a wink. After the piece aired at the end of the suppertime news later that week, other people carrying cameras and furry microphones and tape recorders showed up, all scruffing my hair or calling me buddy, though none asking if I'd actually seen any of the things my parents said I had. While I remained at the heart of my mother's and father's fiction, the vulnerable child threatened by an ancient, insatiable evil, as one of the tabloids put it, I was to be protected at all costs, as if putting a question to a 7-year-old would do worse harm than any ancient, insatiable evil. For a couple of weeks, the phone did something weird. It rang. "It's L.A., my mother would say, handing the receiver to my father and doing a little toe-tapping dance. "Chet! Chet! How's the weather out there?" "Don't tell me." My father would bellow, as if his voice had to carry all the way to California. New York called too. Publishing agents at first, and then once my parents decided on which one to go with, the publishers themselves. Because they had no book to sell, only a pitch. Whenever I heard this term, I thought of baseball, my father on the mound clumsily winding up. There were ghostwriters to talk to first, Whenever I heard that term, I thought of see-through spirits bashing away at see-through typewriters. There were whole days my father spent on the phone. I sometimes overheard him correcting himself about some detail or inventing an entirely new one on the fly. "That's right. Blood came out of the bathroom taps," he said, sharper as the days passed. "What's that?" "Well, I didn't mention the blood before because nobody asked about the blood before. I had a family to look after. I wasn't exactly taking notes." And then, all at once, the phone went back to sleep. LA and New York stopped calling. The doorbell stopped ringing. The cars that paused at the curb to look up at our house stopped coming by. It was early June, and it was over. What was dubbed the Johnstown Horror didn't turn into anything other than a couple local TV news segments and a file of clippings. No third act. My father took to murmuring a lot around that time, as if he'd just discovered his life's fundamental regret. We'd been trying to hide the money from the collectors before that, but now there was no money left to hide. The only remaining asset was the house, and we only held the legally minimal down payment on it. Mom put together a hasty yard sale the same day the for sale sign was struck in the lawn. A yard sale of items bought at other yard sales. I doubt the proceeds would have paid for lunch. We drove out of Johnstown with even less than we had when we drove into it, fleeing not a ghoul, but another of my father's plans, returning to Albany, though this time not to a house but a 2-bedroom apartment over a bookkeeper's office that smelled vaguely of sewage. I had a birthday that summer. Turned 8, turned angry. It was the start of my course toward gianthood, the giving and receiving of bloody noses, the assumption of my role as a kid to keep your distance from, just in case. It's a hell of a thing to have your story taken from you. What's worse is when nobody believes it. 11. You drink as long as I have, and not drinking introduces a whole new set of problems. Take sleep, for instance. Ever since Colorado Springs, I skim across the surface of the night, floating in and out of dreams, none of them pleasant. They may start out harmlessly enough, as the one I've just awoken from did, walking along the stony shore of a lake encircled by forest, my bare feet cool and sure on the rocks smooth as eggs. And then, with audible gulps and spits, the tiny waves grew by an inch. Something rose from the water's green murk. It looked like a turtle's head at first, but another head rose next to it, and another. Not heads, fingers. The same ones that reached out from under the sofa in the house on Henry Street, encircling my ankle just as they did in my dream, yanking me down hard on the rocks and pulling me into the water. Words waited in my throat to be screamed before the water rushed in to drown them. But which ones? What echo to leave behind for the air to swallow? The cell phone has been ringing for a while. I use it to pull me back to consciousness just as the water folds over my head. It hasn't made a sound since the day I broke my promise to Jalen Jackson. I figured I'd never speak to Fernandez again. She was my only friend at the FBI, my only friend anywhere. And I think she liked me. In a going nowhere, single mom, all men are ultimately jerks so forget about it sort of way. Not liked, but she worried about me. A little. Why do I pick up the phone and answer? I miss her. It's that simple. Nate, it's me. It's not the me I'm expecting, but Tillman. Sounding put upon as always, but also something else. Brittle. Confidential, almost shy. I told her not to call me, I say. She's not calling you. Her meaning you too. Her meaning the Bureau. I got that. Understand it, too. She wouldn't even bother giving you a try, but I guess I care less than she does if you tell me to go to hell. Go to hell. Just so you know, I'm not doing this for me. Really? Then who are you doing it for? Allison Prue. Who's Allison Prue? The one we need you to help us find. There's rage now. Wild and sudden, stiffening me like water rushing through a hose. But just before it's so quick I can't cut it off in time, is a flash of Allison Prue. A picture of a girl that comes and goes and leaves me sure that it wasn't a guess but a vision. Something I read from Tillman's memory. A photo he's seen and is thinking about right now. I'm out of that business, I say. I'll be honest with you, Nate. I was pretty goddamn happy when you quit. It was getting tedious doing all that voodoo shit with you. You were getting tedious. And I'm guessing you felt the same way about me. That's sweet. But the thing is... But I'm not gonna deny you have talent, he goes on, ignoring me. It's extraordinary what you can do. When they assigned this file to me, this hush-hush initiative they would only say might lead to the establishment of a special unit, I thought it was a promotion. Then I found out I was going to be recruiting you. And you knew you must have pissed in somebody's cornflakes. I wasn't happy about it. I felt like I'd been pulled out of the life I was supposed to live. It felt like a goddamn joke. Aha. Can I tell you something? My marriage has suffered because of the work we've done. And God only knows where I stand in the Bureau's ranks these days. It has to be pretty near the bottom. Are you looking for an apology from me? No. You were just doing your job, just like I was. That's what I'm saying here. It doesn't matter if my bosses don't believe in the work we were doing or how we were doing it. We believed in it. I believed in it. Listen, you hear that violin? We're not finished. We're getting better the more we work together. You're stronger now than at the beginning and you know it. It would be wrong to put your skills on the shelf and walk away. That's why you have to help us. Wrong. I don't have to do anything. Let me ask you this. What if this girl, right age, right circumstances, let's point that out right now, what if it turns out to be a burial killing case? Odds are it isn't. But what if it is? You want to let this guy go around doing this to people? That help you sleep? I don't sleep. And it's not a guy. It's guys. How's that work? The fuck do I know? Because you can see what he does. And because I think he wants to show you what he does. It's not just me. You've seen it too. But I can't see her. I can't see where Allison Prue is now. This isn't Tillman being pissed at me. This is a man who desperately wants to prevent something terrible from happening but knows he can't. This is a professional being unprofessional. He sounds a lot like me. I'm sorry, I say. But I can't go back. I can't do it again. She's 12 years old. What's that got to do? She's 12. She was taken less than 2 hours ago, and we think she's still alive. Hang up. This isn't a thought. It's an internal utterance so clear and loud I can't believe Tillman doesn't hear it. Hang up now. Don't let him say another word. One more question and I will. What's the harm? One question. Then I'm dropping the phone in the garbage disposal. Where? Johnstown, New York. The next breath I take tastes of befouled meat. The room filled with the rank odor of the tannery. Nate, you still there? I'm here. I need an answer. Fuck you. I'm still waiting. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'm in. How do I get there? We can drive you to the airport right now. We? Me and Fernandez, Tillman says. We're parked out front. Part 3. The Bone Man's House. 12. Johnstown is the sort of place common to the Mohawk Valley. Perhaps the only sort of place it has left. A one-industry town that has long since lost its one industry, and now exists for a collection of lesser reasons. People who should have left a generation ago but haven't got around to it yet. City people looking for a Victorian to renovate. The region's transient unemployed who are always on the lookout for cheaper rent and rumors of work that lure and evaporate like mirages. Despite their obvious problems, there are always some who see solutions in upstate towns like these. A return to the past, a reinvention of the future, a flight from themselves. Even the briefest excursion through the old streets after sliding off the 30A that bypasses town gives a reason to see that, with the right idea and good timing, something might be done here. Just look at the for sale signs outside the houses and for lease signs in the windows downtown. How simple it would be to acquire real estate in a place like this, enroll your kids in the decent-looking school, live a life of easy parking and J.Crew catalog lifestyle shots of playing in the front yard, leaves, or sitting around a fireplace that provides actual warmth by burning actual wood. Johnstown, New York, is unquestionably diminished from its heyday, but it still presents itself as wholesome, handsome in its way, hushed and preserved as a museum. On the plane, I told Fernandez and Tillman not to tell me anything about the case until we got here. Even after we landed and piled into the Crown Victoria waiting for us at the airstrip, I asked for a drive around town instead of heading straight to the motel. A drive? We're on the clock here, Nate, Fernandez said. Don't tell me about the clock. I know about the goddamn clock. I sounded like a sulky kid, which is pretty much what I am when it comes to having my feelings hurt by Fernandez. She tricked me to get here, and, worse, used Tillman to do it. It wasn't easy to admit that she knew me as well as she did. It was even harder to admit how jealous I was thinking of her in cahoots with him. It wasn't the two of them leveraging my weak points that I minded so much as the idea of the two of them together, planning, their heads close over some diner table, excited by the game of it all. Partners. Turn left, I tell Fernandez, who's the one behind the wheel. All of a sudden, I realize that we've started north up Henry Street toward downtown, and if we don't deviate our course, we'll drive past the house. Turn! Fernandez makes the left, shoots a smirk at me in the rearview mirror, and just like that, I'm a little in love with her again. So you grew up here, that it? Tillman asks when I let Fernandez drive back out to the 30A that will take us past the Utilitarian Mall to the Holiday Inn where we'll be headquartered. I didn't grow up here. I changed here. It's not what I meant to say. It's just what comes out. Changed? Puberty. Uh-huh. You'll know it when you get to it, Tillman. Another coincidence, Fernandez says. You living here when you were a kid. It's not a coincidence. Then what is it? The playoff round to find the buried. A homecoming reunion. A trap. I'm not sure yet, I say. The Holiday Inn is a two-story slab atop a small rise on the highway between Johnstown and Gloversville, the former's nearly conjoined twin 2 miles farther north. The stretch of parking lot out front is empty except for a couple rentals. Salesmen, I'm guessing. 3 dented beaters by the door, the staff, and half a dozen Johnstown police cruisers. That's got to be the whole fleet, Tillman says. They're doing their thing, Fernandez says, parking several spots away from the nearest car. We're here to do ours. So why are we here at all? I ask her. Protocol. We need to let them know who we are. Get whatever information they may have, use what we need on their resources side. And then we go our own way. Small towns like these, you gotta kiss the chief's ring, Tillman adds. Do they know what we do? Tillman and Fernandez share a glance. We sure as hell didn't tell them, she says. That doesn't mean they won't know, he says. How's that? After Colorado Springs, word kinda leaked about our unit among some uniforms out there in the big wide world, Fernandez answers. Nothing official or anything, and the media never found out about it. But they're cops. And cops talk to cops. About me, you mean. The freak who's hunting the freaks by holding people's hands. There's a pause as the two of them consider a reply, but I realize I'm right. It's exactly what we do. Exactly what I am. Let's assume they don't know shit. It's usually a safe bet in places like this. Fernandez says, pops her door open and starts across the lot. An overheated meeting room, a long table, and 3 cops posed around the far end as if for a family portrait. 2 30-something officers standing on either side of a seated older man. There are files with each of our names on them in front of the other chairs, and while Fernandez and Tillman find theirs and sit, I ignore them all, head straight to the window and try to figure out how to open it so I can breathe. Agent Tillman, this is Agent Fernandez, and over there is Agent Russo, Tillman says by way of brisk introduction. I notice he's not even bothering with saying I'm with the Bureau anymore. Ted Smalley, the older man says, standing now. Mid-50s, though his head has the chubby cheek, chrome-domed, rosy openness of an infant. A monstrous baby raised on onion rings. I'm the chief around here, and this is Atchison and Poulter, at your service. The 2 officers nod, but say nothing. Despite the apparent warmth of his tone, it's clear that Smalley is a ballbuster they don't want to screw up around, especially in front of federal agents. It's the way he lifts his belt as he stands and heaves back his shoulders. The maximum claim on the room's available cubic feet for himself. We've got a lot of work to do, as you know, Smalley starts winding up. But there's also some immediate administrative issues I'd like to see tended to. Division of powers, municipal, federal. I'm sure you've dealt with this kind of thing before. Yes, Tillman says, his patience already strained. For instance, we need to sort out who's running point on press releases, news conferences, Smalley continues. We haven't made a statement yet, and there's already a pack of wolves circling the station downtown. Now, while I generally hate the sons of bitches, they won't... Excuse me, Chief. That's not really our thing, Fernandez interrupts. What's important for the 3 of us is to get started on our investigation. You're the quarterback on the core activities, not us. Sure, of course, Smalley says, working to discern whether this statement is a real concession or smoke up his ass. Well, we've already got all our uniforms and everyone the Gloversville force can spare out. We're referring to our own independent investigation, Fernandez says, interrupting again. The way it works is that you'll be running the conventional search on the ground, and we'll be doing our own working alongside but outside of your team's activities, Tillman explains. We're conventional, and you do your own thing. That it? That's right. Together but separate. We found that works best. Smalley belies his name by being a big man. Not tall, but thick around the chest and thighs, so that he appears rooted no matter where he stands or sits. An oak tree that is miraculously capable of movement. Just as he moves now, pivoting to look my way. When he speaks next, it's without any trace of the homey welcome he was faking up until now. I think you'll find that window doesn't open. Would have thought you'd have known that before trying. How would I know that? You're the psychic, aren't you? So there it is. He knows. And now he's got to make a show of disapproval in front of his 2 uniforms. But then I catch something behind his eyes. An aura I'm sometimes able to see, not around people, but in them. He would merely dislike me if it was a matter of an old-school cop confronted by a new-age flake intruding on his territory. But he hates me for some other reason. Whoa, you're good, I manage. You after my job or something? Is that what they call it? A job? Smalley looks to Tillman. That girl was taken less than 4 hours ago, and you bring this joker in? We consider him a valuable asset. Jesus H, Smalley says, then shakes his head at the 2 officers. Guess the feds figure that poor kid's dead already. We didn't fly across half the country to waste anybody's time, Fernandez says. We're here to find her. Yeah? How many other missing people has your valuable asset here found alive? For a moment, I think I've succeeded in yanking the window out of the frame it's been painted into. Or perhaps I've only pushed my hand through the glass. It's the rush of air past my ears, a hot gust out of nowhere, as if with the opening of an oven door. But the window remains unmoved, the noise coming from inside me, the furious throb of blood. Times sure have changed at the Bureau, Smalley is saying from what sounds like an increasing distance. Sending gypsies out to a kidnapping investigation? What's next? I start for him after gypsies. 2 strides from the window to where the son of a bitch is standing at the head of the table like he's ready to carve a turkey. He watches me come, almost amused, curious to discover what I have in mind. When he sees my hands raising for his throat, he doesn't make a defensive move. He just pulls himself straight to meet the blow. It's impossible to tell if it's because he doesn't have time to do anything else, or if he thinks it's unlikely that I'm able to bring him down. Nate! Fernandez kicks her chair back and stands between us, though she looks only at me. I want him out of here, I say. He's the chief of police in this jurisdiction. He's the man with the keys on his belt. Then let him give them to us, or he can shove them up his ass. Look at him, a burnt bulb hick who's only gonna slow us down. That you reading my future? Smalley says. No, that's me reading the horse shit on your shoes. Smalley actually looks down at his feet. When he finds the black leather clean and polished, he makes a click sound from his back teeth. He looks up directly into my eyes, fearless and looking 20 years younger than 2 seconds ago. I know who you are. He doesn't go on. It leaves Fernandez to nudge him. What are you talking about? The haunted house kid, Smalley says. His parents tried to sell a tall tale on the back of a little girl gone missing 30 years ago. Real classy stock you come from. You don't know a thing about it, I say. But I do. I know all about it. Question is, do your minders hear? What's going on, Nate? Fernandez asks. Later. What other little girl? Later. I step back from her, almost tripping over the leg of the chair behind me. I can see you're not fully up to speed on Mr. Russo's place in Johnstown history, Smalley says to Fernandez and Tillman, enjoying himself now. Your shaman certainly has a gift for missing children. I'll give him that. Pauline Alt, and now Allison Prue. Both female, both born in town, both 12 years old. And you, just a boy of 7 talking nonsense about a monster. A skeleton or other, wasn't that it? Congratulations, I say. How long did that Google search take you? I'm surprised you can read, let alone type. I don't know you from the internet, Mr. Russo. I remember you. He slips his thumbs under his belt and lets the rest of his hands hang off him like gloves on a hook. See, I've been on the Johnstown force for a long time, he goes on, his anger building right along with mine. I was a sergeant when Pauline Alt disappeared. Worked that case hard. So I remember when your daddy came out saying there was a ghostie living in the Heinrichs place on Henry Street who might have had a hand in it. His teeth. Triumphant display of yellowish canines. Well, I'm a fair bit older now, he continues. And I can tell you I've never known a ghost to do harm to a child, or anyone else for that matter. People do that. Daddies do that. Grown men do that. Are you accusing me of something? I'm just laying out my thoughts. You have to understand, Mr. Russo. I'm not as smart as your FBI friends here. I've got to talk this stuff out. My weight shifts from left to right and back again, as if I'm looking for a way to get around Fernandez, when I'm actually working to regain my balance. I was just a boy when Pauline went missing. I say. And I started my day in Colorado and was in a plane until 20 minutes ago. But that's what makes it so interesting. Alibis always are. Like one of those tricks where the man in the fancy cape gets shackled in chains before they lock him in the safe. He still gets out, doesn't he? The magician sets it up so that he always gets out. Maybe I've been silent and alone too long before today. Or maybe this guy is craftier than he looks. Whatever it is, he's reclaimed this room and all the air in it in under a minute. Well, this is fun, I say, bumping the chair behind me so that it squeaks away in retreat. But I thought there's a human being we're here to find. You're right, Smalley says. So do you all mind if I continue? Everyone sits except for the chief. When Fernandez shoots me a "what the hell was that all about" look, I pretend I don't notice. And while I can feel Tillman burning the same question into me from across the table, he's easier to ignore. Allison Prue left her house on Prospect Street at 6:45 in the morning to attend gymnastics class at Knox Junior High, just as she did every Tuesday morning. At present, we have a single eyewitness who saw her walking along her normal course between her house and the school, which is only a couple blocks apart. She never got there. Who's the eyewitness? Tillman asks. Elderly lady named Edwina Dillenbeck. Lived at the corner of Madison and Perry her whole life. She have a husband? Fernandez jumps in. Children? You mean someone who might have done it? Husband died 10 years ago at least, and the Dillenbeck kids are long gone. Both girls, by the way. We've got a list of names on the registry, Tillman says. There anybody on it you'd say we should look at first? By registry, you mean that list of child molesters? None of them live in Johnstown. So there's no name here that jumps out at you as someone to be particularly concerned about. Not one in a town of 8,000. Tillman holds the printout sheet to Smalley, but he doesn't take it. People like that don't tend to stay long around here, he says. It's a small town thing. Gives a man in my position a certain leeway about who's made to feel at home and who isn't. Understand what I'm saying? Who are you looking at then? Fernandez asks. You're the FBI agent. You do the profiling about the psychological traits and lousy childhoods. I'm just a dumb cop, so I'm looking at everybody. What about the girl's family? They're pretty upset right now, as you can imagine. Agent Fernandez isn't asking how they're feeling, Tillman says. Smalley raps a knuckle on the table. Right. You've got to look at the family first in a situation like this. They teach you that at Quantico, don't they? Well, I guess I've pretty much eliminated them from my mind. Why? Fernandez says. I know them. They're good people. Mother is a teacher at the primary school. Father has his own small business. Doing what? Sheet metal, roofing, repairs, that sort of thing. Has a couple part-time guys working for him in the summers and keeps things going on his own in the winters. Church-going man. Likes to drink now and then, but I never had a problem with him. They have any other kids? One, a boy. Name's Jacob. How old? 7, Smalley says, then smirks my way. Same as you way back when. Isn't that something? I might otherwise take another run at him, but I'm somewhere else. Interpreting a sensation like someone has entered the room, though the door to the boardroom remains closed. A message sent out on a frequency that I'm picking up, but not clearly enough to understand. It's not meant for me anyway, or for anyone in particular. A cry of terror that only I'm able to catch. Let me see your picture, I say. Tillman opens his file folder, pulls out a school photo of Allison Prue and frisbees it over the table at me. Long-chinned, elfish-eared, teeth of a size and arrangement that, in a smile, rested on her bottom lip, pulling it back. I'm not expecting the glasses. A tortoiseshell frame meant for someone decades older, as if she was trying on her mother's pair and had forgotten to return them. Behind the lenses, brown eyes, wide and clear. A testimony to exercise and early nights, and the certainty that she would go on to better things than most in the lineup of fellow Knox Junior High students waiting for their turn in front of the camera on picture day. Fernandez leans close next to me. The smell of her skin like a gin and tonic. Lemony and mineral and strong. You getting something? Not exactly. Is it her? Is she still alive? I can't be sure, but I think so, yeah. Has he... I don't know. You see where she might be? No. It's like she's veiled somehow. All the particulars kind of rubbed away. It feels intentional. I flipped the picture over, as if looking at her image for a second longer brings the same pain as staring at the sun. I think he may have hidden her somewhere. Smalley double takes as Fernandez and Tillman nod at what I've said. You people are listening to him? He says. He looks at a photo, makes a face like he's gonna crap himself, and that's it. You all just... What's Allison's weight? Height? I ask, cutting Smalley off. He glances down at a sheet in front of him. 105.52. Small, that's good. I start for the door. I want to meet the family. Fernandez takes her leather satchel and falls in behind me on the way to the door, as does Tillman after her. None of us look back Smalley's way. Wait! Where the hell you going? The big man calls after us. And what's so good about her being small? It might give us more time if he buries her. Fernandez answers without turning and follows me out into the hall, leaving Tillman to close the door behind him. 13. We come out the doors and cross the parking lot at something close to a run. A wind is picked up that lifts the first of the fallen leaves and slaps them against our cheeks. Okay, what was the chief talking about back there? Tillman asked me, even before we're in the car. Nothing you didn't already know. Bullshit. We get in, Tillman roaring the engine and shouting at me in the back seat as he reverses and screeches out onto 38 toward town. We knew you lived here for a short time when you were a kid. That's it, he says. I think I would have remembered if someone told me your father tried to blame a girl's disappearance on a dead man. It was a play at a quick buck, that's all. Not that it worked. How did it work? My parents made up this stuff out of next to nothing. Took it public, but it didn't take off. Pauline's disappearance was a coincidence they figured they could hang it on. Hey, another coincidence. We should be getting used to how thick those are stacking up, shouldn't we, Claire? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm shouting now. I was 7 years old, for fuck's sake. Tillman and Fernandez take a second to weigh my denial. Where's your father now? Fernandez asked, taking over. He died before any of the burial killings started, so you can forget about him. Did they ever find Pauline Alt? No. So she could be in a box somewhere too, right? I guess so. Or she could be dealing blackjack in Biloxi, or an unrelated pile of bones nobody's found yet out back of a rest stop. Just tell me this. What are you hiding, Nate? Though Tillman asked the question, it's Fernandez who shifts halfway around in her seat to watch me answer it. I don't understand most of it myself, I say, fighting an unexpected wave of emotion. My ability to see the way I do, it's not something I was born with. It was given to me when I was a kid here in Johnstown. And I don't know what it was, but the thing that gave it to me was bad. It wasn't alive. It wasn't human. A bad, bad thing. Tillman takes a hard right on red at the corner of Briggs Street, causing a chorus of honks to sound off behind us. I'm not hiding any of it. I don't know what it is, so how could I? But here's what I do know, I go on. This investigation, if it's going to work, you have to trust me. And you have to stop trying to fit it into logic and rules. Because the weird part of it isn't just that I see things through people, it's that the ones who've been buried alive are all connected in a way that taking the logical approach is never going to figure out. You're forgetting something, Fernandez says. What? You're part of it somehow. Yes, but now you're forgetting something. What? If I am, you're both part of it too. 14. Allison Prue's house was once a broad-shouldered yellow brick dwelling for a single prosperous family, but has since been cut up into a fourplex of apartments, her family occupying the whole of the top third floor. To reach the door, you have to take an external staircase that appears to have once been a fire escape that's been roofed and walled in with plywood. On the way up, there's squares cut out here and there of a size you couldn't put your head through. I think of Allison coming and going by this route, her way out into the world and back again, stairs that, in the gray semi-darkness of dawn when she descended them to go to gymnastics class this morning, she found her footing from memory instead of turning on the single bulb at the top. How do I know? Allison tells me. Or maybe it's the metal of the steps themselves, grieving the loss of the touch of her sneakers, always the first human weight of the day. Tillman is at the top and knocking before Fernandez and I are halfway up. It's why when the door is opened by a thin man in a white t-shirt ghosted with mustard stains, the man has to look past him to see how many more of us are clanking up toward him. Wilson Prue? I'm Agent Tillman with... Call me Will? He says it like a question. Maybe for him it is. Either way, the four of us are now gathered around the threshold, Will Prue blocking our way with his hands on the door's frame, though judging from the blank expression he wears, it may be that he has to keep his grip there to prevent himself from collapsing into our arms. Will? I'm Claire Fernandez, FBI. May we come in? He looks at her without looking at her. There's something vaguely Amish about him. The ridgeline of beard, the wrinkles that come from working out of doors, along with a clenched demeanor that suggests a love of order and privacy above all else. You found her, he says. Will, Mr. Prue, we're here to... They send people like you in person to tell people like me that. A mother to tell another mother bad news, he says to Fernandez, not acknowledging she's spoken. And then to Tillman, a father telling a father. He shifts his focus to me. So where does that leave you? We haven't found Allison yet, I say, but we're going to. You are? Yes. You don't have any kids, do you? No, sir, I don't. Didn't think so. He may be about to hit me. He may be about to crumple to the floor and curl up into a ball. It's impossible to tell based on the flatness of his voice, the numbed parts of him that might otherwise show what he's feeling. We're here to help, I say. How? He says finally. How can you tell me you're going to find her? Because it ends here. Because the Bone Man wants to see me in person one more time. Because my life means less to me than your daughter's, a person I've never met, but who's reaching out to me even as I stand here right now. Because I find people, I say. It's unclear whether I'm convincing him, or if in his oddly emotionless shock, he's hearing everything anyone else might say is false. Maybe everything is a lie to him. He's found it safer that way, the odds improved. The truth is, after this, I'm done, I continue, telling Will Prue something I haven't told anybody else, including myself. I can't do this anymore. It's too much. This is my last job. He blinks so slow it's as if there's glue over his eyes. Breathes out through his foam-rimmed mouth, filling the small space of the landing with the smell of wet wool. My wife is in the kitchen, he says, and takes a half step to the right. If we come in sideways and let our backs rub against him, there's just enough room to enter. Fernandez first, then Tillman, then me. Dreading the contact with his body, but surprised that, when my shirt hisses over his, I'm not flooded with the worry and pain I assumed has deadened his outward appearance. There is only a coldness. Not emotionally cold. Not only that, but his body temperature. along with a low electrical hum of the kind a transformer makes, mechanical and constant and radiating threat. I pass him, trying to feel through what's missing in the man, making my way along the creaking hallway to the tiny kitchen at the back of the apartment. It's why I barely notice the woman slumped in a chair at the table who Fernandez is trying to return to consciousness. Mrs. Prue? Audrey? Fernandez shakes her, the head rolling heavy as a bowling ball. It doesn't seem possible that a neck so long and prematurely liver-spotted could remain attached to it without something giving away. Call an ambulance, Fernandez says to no one in particular. None of us move. Not even Audrey Prue's husband, who watches his wife with the marginal interest of a physician familiar with a patient's chronic condition. Then the woman is gasping, wiping the spit from her chin. Oh, God, she announces. I was out there for a second. You fainted. I'm sorry. Oh, shit. Sorry, There's nothing to apologize for. Allison Prue's mother looks at Fernandez directly for the first time, her head steady. How would you know that? It's not aggression. Audrey Prue doesn't have the energy for that, even if she felt it, which I doubt she does. She's not in control of what she's saying. She's not in control of anything. Because from the moment her daughter didn't show up at school, and the gymnastics coach called to see if she was sick, from the moment it dawned on her that Allison was now the subject of one of those stories on the news that you watched and thought, that's the nightmare of all nightmares right there. She felt all the emotional checks and balances normally at her command pull away from her. Even with all the experience I've had in kitchens like these, with mothers like her, Audrey Prue may be the most fractured person I've ever met. The elongated shape of her skull, ears red as stove elements on high, her frame barely fixed to the chair, her portrait a kind of cubist rearrangement of herself. Tillman pulls up a chair and sits in front of her. Behind me, I can feel Will Prue come to stand in the doorframe of the kitchen. Blocking entrances and exits is his household advantage. A skinny gatekeeper. My name is John. This is Claire, and behind me is Nate. We're here to provide you and your family with a special opportunity, but there isn't a whole lot of time to think it over. This isn't Tillman's usual introduction for interviewees. He's letting his rules slide, as if he knows it's true this is our last chance to get it right as much as I do. The result is that he sounds like he's selling this woman some fool's gold on a late-night infomercial, which isn't really so far off. In any case, she's listening. Just as her husband is, nose breathing against my shoulder. Okay, she says. What do I do? There's a moment when none of us know who's best to answer this. A moment that allows a ghost to appear, a figure advancing from out of the gloom of a bedroom off the kitchen. A boy, wild-haired, smears of food colored outside the lines of his mouth. A child who, in the life-altering shifts of this day, has already fallen into neglect, a feral, nervy silence. Not a ghost, then. Allison's little brother, who was perhaps always this way. You're Jacob, I say. The boy's head lolls around atop his neck like his mother's just had, though in his case, it's an apparently intentional gesture that may be his version of a lazy nod. Come sit with us, I say. We were just talking to your mom about... Go back to your room, Jacob, his father says, in the same flat tone with which he's spoken all along. But the boy flinches as though shouted at, retreats back into the shadows and pulls the door 2/3 closed. Without looking back at the boy's father, I say, sometimes it helps if I can gather all your energies in one place. He shuffles over to sit in the chair next to his wife, bumping into me on the way, harder than he needed to, and sits up so straight he appears bird-like, a stork or flamingo, alert to an approaching predator. Energies? He says. Maybe I should explain. We're part of a team that... Let me see some ID. Right now. My name is Nate Russo. I don't care about who you are. I'm asking you who you're with. Tillman has his badge and photo card out, lays it on the table. FBI, he says. We already told you this. The Father doesn't look at the identification. Only me. But his question is for Tillman. What's he talking about? Nate works with us. We've identified a very special talents in him. In cases like these, he's a psychic. We think he can help us find your daughter. Psychic, Will Prue repeats. Like a mind reader. Something like that. The tall man addresses me now. You want to read my family's minds? Allison is trying to reach us right now, Mr. Prue, I start. Wherever she is, she's left a trail of breadcrumbs behind. Chances are the regular police won't be able to see that trail in time to help her. Thou shalt not worship false idols. That what you are? A magician? A seer? I try not to show how off-put I am by his use of my preferred description of myself. How this is the sort of mind-reading trick the Bone Man likes to perform on me. Now that I'm looking at him, there is something of the Bone Man in Will Prue's shape. An old-fashioned deliberateness to his movements. The voice, too. The unnerving calm of the hypnotist or pastor. It's not magic, I say. It's Allison. Her energy is out there, and you shall have no other gods before me. Mr. Prue, listen to me. He stands. If it's possible, he's even taller than when he opened the door moments ago. Get out of my house.
Extreme. Just couldn't get off. I don't feel so good. Sorry for not reading chat or anything. Just, yeah. If anyone's watching, I'm sorry. Okay. Bye-bye.